Welcome to this tutorial on how to render using ZBrush and Compositing in Photoshop. This tutorial is aimed more towards concepting and not real-time rendering. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to use MatCap materials in ZBrush to render your model. And then in part 2, I'll go through how to use the renders from ZBrush to composite in Photoshop my final concept. This will be a lengthy tutorial, so grab a coffee or tea and let's get into part 1, ZBrush MatCap rendering. So here we are in ZBrush, and I'm just going to use this model for the example for this project. You might have noticed it from a previous time-lapse video that I created for YouTube. It is the same model, I've just added a bit more detail to it so that it can have a bit more going on with the model in itself. This will be the rendered model that we're going to use. I'm going to quickly go through the techniques I use in ZBrush to render this out. It's going to be different from the previous tutorial video that I created, where I show you how to render using a colored model. This one is just going to be pure material rendering using ZBrush with no color maps on the model. So let's get started. First thing I like to do is change the aspect ratio of our canvas. So I've already done it, but I usually go to the document section and come down to this part here in the tab. Now when you first look at this, it's going to have a highlighted proportions button turned on. You want to turn that off, change it to 1920 by 1080. This button here just works with these figures here, so if you turn that off, then you can put any figure in either one of here. So if you want to put 1920 by 1080, then hit the resize button. It's going to come up with a window that you need to click yes to, and then you'll have a bigger canvas. Then all you got to do is press Ctrl N on your keyboard and then drag and drop your model back in to the scene, and press T, and then it'll be a 3D model. Once you've done that, you can come over here to draw, you can come over to draw and set your aspect ratio of your camera up in here. So at the moment, for this example, I'm going to use a aspect ratio of 30, focal length of 35, and on the horizontal plane. What this does, if I just show you, is it just gives you a different focal depth for your model. Now I want mine to be quite a dramatic pose, so I'm going to go for 35 on my camera. Once you've done that, you can then position your model into where you want the camera to focus on. So how do you want your character or model to be positioned within the scene? I've already saved mine out in Documents, Z App Link Properties. I have a cluster here which has got a saved view of my model. So if I click that, you can see this is what's going to be rendered, and it's very handy to use this Z App Link Properties when you find your position that you like for your model. So you can always go back if you move the model around accidentally, you can always come up here to Documents, hit the cluster 1, and it'll bring you back to your model camera model's position. So let's get started with actually rendering the model. So I want to come over here and open up this tab by double clicking and drop in my lights tab in here, as well as drop in my render tab as well. So we're going to look at the light first. I like to position my light, focal light, or my main light. That's the word. Main light first, and then hit the PBR render and find a good light shadow ratio. So I like this this look to my character. It's got a nice shadow on one side and it's showing the side of the model nicely and hiding the rest in shadow. I might want to bring the distance down a bit so it focuses more on this part of the model here. And then when I'm happy with this light, I can come over to my render tab, go into the render properties, make sure that shadow is turned on, it usually is. Come down to PBR shadow, bump the angle up a bit, and this will give us a softer shadow rather than a harsh shadow. Hit the PBR render and just see how that new shadow is going to fall on our model. It's a lot softer. Maybe I'll put the intensity of the softness down a bit more. Let's try 15. Hit the render button. That's better. It's a slight softness to the model shadow now. Once I'm happy with the shadow, I'll come over to the secondary light, turn that on. Now you can turn off the first light if you can't see what's going on with the secondary light. And the secondary light is going to be like our fill light, so it's just going to give us a bit of fill to the character. It's going to soften those shadows a bit more. This one will not have any shadows applied to it. It will just have a light applied to it, and it's on a very soft intensity at the moment. You might want to bump that up or leave it down. You can even turn the ambient occlusion down a bit, or the ambient light a bit down a bit, and we'll just hit PBR and see how that comes out. So you can see it's going to have a little bit of light where that shadow is. It's going to have light coming from the left, and if we turn the main light on as well and hit the PBR render again, there we go. So it's just softening those shadows in those areas now, not making it so harsh. So I'm happy with the way the lights look here. So I'm going to come up to my render pass, or render properties, sorry. Turn the detailing up to 4. Turn the ambient occlusion on. Come down to the PBR shadows. Actually, we'll change the PBR AO first, ambient occlusion. So what I like to do is I like to set my blur down to 1, the Z depth up to 1, the resolution up to roughly 4600, the raise quite a bit more, 400, roughly 400, and you could do the same for the shadow. You could just bump the raise up to 400. Now this is going to take a lot longer to render, but then once you've done with it, then you'll have your rendered shadow and ambient occlusion, and you won't have to have it on again for the next steps that we're going to take. So I'm just going to hit the PBR render now and let it render out, and we'll return once the rendering is done. Once the rendering is done, you'll have this final image. And what we want to do then is just come over to the render passes and export each one of these images out as a PSD file so that we can take it into Photoshop later. I'm just going to do that now so that we can skip through the boring part of me saving things in file names. Once you're done, you should have something like this in a file that you have saved. So you have your PBR AO, your depth, the mask, and the render and the shadow exported out. So once you're happy with that, we can move on to turning off the ambient occlusion and shadow properties, so that we don't have that long wait time for waiting for things to render, and we can move on now to rendering with MatCap materials. So in my MatCap materials, I have a huge library of MatCaps. You can find all these on ZBrush Central's resource center. They are all free to download, and I will leave a link in the download below so that you can. I will leave a link for you in the tutorial below so that you can go ahead and download all of these MatCaps. I will also name the ones that we are going to use in this project. So yeah, if you want the MatCaps that I have, just go over to ZBrush Resource Center and download all the MatCaps there for free. So what I like to start off with first is the MatCap reflection. Render that out. I can see here there's going to be an issue with the dome on his head, which has not got enough subdivision. So what I want to do is I just want to subdivide that. So I just subdivided the dome a few times just so it's not a low-res model basically. So when we hit the render button again, you can see it's a lot softer on that sphere or dome on his head because I have subdivided it a few times, and it will give us a cleaner render using the MatCaps. So I'll just come over to the render pass, BPR render passes, and I will save this out in a new folder. Now I don't name these, but you may. And then we'll move on to the next one, which will be the normal map. Oh, sorry. Let me find that one again. The normal map. And we'll just render that out. Come over here. Save it. The pink bubblegum, or the GK bubblegum texture. Just render that out. And save that. And I don't want a metal material as well. And I might take a few metal materials into Photoshop to composite and play around with. The first one I'd like to go for will be the gold one, for the gold trim on our model. 4. Then I would go for another metal. Let's try this one. Yep. Let's render this one out. And then there's a metal down here. Maybe not that one. The web quicksilver. And let's try this one. Oh, there's another model without subdivided layers on. So I'm just going to subdivide it again so that it's smoother. Render this one out. Save it. And then we can get a cavity map out, which will be the Framer 01 material. And I'm going to take with me the GK Boeing. Just play around and see which other ones I'd like. The DJ Soft Solar. Take that one as well. We're just having a look for any others that we like the look of. too much on that one. Let's take this one out. So that's Sketch 04. And we'll also go for the skin shade material. And the reflected map number 2. And these are going to be all the ones we're going to take with us into Photoshop to composite later. So now we want to move on to our reflective or specular highlights for our model. So we take it to the blend material, and we come over here and we turn off all the color layers, and we can then come down to the lights, turn off the secondary light because we only need the one, bump up the light intensity, and rotate this to back so we can get that reflective, that rim light, sorry. We're happy with that. Come in here, new folder. Don't have to name it, but if you want to, you can. I'm just going to call this 01. This is where we'll put all our reflective maps, or specular maps. And we have to remember where the light is coming from when we render these spec maps. We don't want the light in the part where the shadow was, so we want the light on the other side of the body instead. That one blue. Now once you get used to this, you'll be able to find the right light setups that you want very quickly. I've been doing this for a while now, so it's quite easy for me to find the light that I like. Let's change this over now to a jelly bean, and this will give us a nice point light on the or reflection on the metal pieces that we want. And that is our lights. Now we want to have a ID map or ID texture so that we can choose which parts we want to composite in Photoshop. So this is going to be we're going to use the blend color first because then we can see the model as we work with the colors that we want. So just come in here and grab a color, come over to the color menu, and you can even dock this because we're going to need it for quite a bit. We're just going to fill this object with that color. Move over to the next piece and fill that object. Now if you've got quite a lot of metal pieces, it's probably best to fill the colors or the models of the model where the pieces aren't as many, basically, because you could take forever putting colors down on this map, and you don't want to waste too much time if you're in a hurry to get this model done. The whole piece, the whole weapon, sorry, is going to be one color. These bands can be another color. Those bands. So it's basically just finding all these objects you want to mask off later on, and assigning them a new ID. What I'll do is I'll return when I have finished filling in my model with the new ID map. So when you are done, you will have something that looks like this, and then all we have to do is come over here to the material tab and select the flat column map and press the render button. Oh, something's going on here. Oh, never mind. It was something to do with the material that was already on that piece. So if you have that problem, all you got to do is select the material channel and just fill that object with the material channel, and it will fill the model with the new material, which will be the flat material we're using. Seeing as this is going to be the last map that we export out, it's okay to do this with the model. So when you've done that, you should have something that looks like this, and all you got to do is render this out. Still got one there. Render it out, and you should come out with something like this. And we just need to come over here to the render pass and save this out as a ID map. Once you're done with that, you are done in ZBrush, and we can now go over to Photoshop and start compositing this model or render in Photoshop. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back to the second part in the tutorial, where we're going to look in Photoshop to how to render our character, composite our character in Photoshop using the materials and the lights that we just created in ZBrush. So before we start that, I just want to come over and show people how I get all my images into these layers. So when you open all your images, they're going to come up as different PSD files. All you've got to do is come into the PSD file, press Ctrl A to select everything, Ctrl C, and then Ctrl V to paste it, and that should paste it exactly over the top of all the other ones. Now I already have my reflection map in there, so I will not be using that one, but I have also named each one of these maps from the ZBrush file that we just, from the ZBrush scene that we just came from, so you can see which ones I am changing as we go along. So to start off with, I like to trim the scene down a bit, because we have a lot of empty space around our model and we don't want to have so much empty space for the composition. So we just come over to the crop section, crop file, and just or crop tool, sorry, and just crop it in until we get a nice position for our character. And we'll come over to the mask tool and fill in that empty space with more black, and then hide the mask tool, and also fill it in on the normal map and hide the normal map. Don't worry too much that you can see the background in right now. We're going to fill in the background later on, and also cut out the model from the background so that we don't have to have it with a background. It can be separated from the background, sorry, so we can paint or do whatever in the background later on. So we just in the layer section, I just created a new layer. I'm just going to call this BG, and that will be our background layer, and I'll just fill it in with black, fully black. And we now have a composition I like, and we just gonna select all of these and make a group, put them all into one group, and call this the base model. And I just want to scale it down a bit and move them up so we got a bit more floor to work with later on. And I might even revert that, sorry, and give them a bit more headroom, and bring it in just a little bit on the side and down a bit on the feet. There we go. We just want to fill in those areas again with the black background, and we can now get into our layers. So I have them all turned off at the moment, so when I turn them on, we'll just turn them all off and start from scratch. So that we got our base layer, and we should have a skin shader 4 layer. I'm just going to bring this down to the bottom, turn that on, and actually replace the base layer with it. Turn this base layer into a multiply. There we go. And then the next one will be the MC metal that we created. And I'll just turn this on to a soft light. Just turn down the opacity and fill a bit. And for the gold, I don't want to mess with the gold. I think the gold works well on a normal map, on the normal layer. So I'm going to move the gold over to the top and put a mask on it, and invert the mask by pressing Ctrl I. Come over to my brushes, and I will be using the standard brushes. So I'll just use the hard brush for this one, and taking the hard brush, I'm just going to paint in areas I want to be gold for our models. So if you don't have ID map, like we did export an ID map, but because I only want parts of the body to have that texture, we can just paint that in using a mask inside of Photoshop. So you might want to turn off the opacity so that you can get a full color on it. Just do the same around here. Press X to invert the color mask. Just fill in this all these parts that I want to have gold. Try to be as clean as possible. Again, this technique is will be very handy if you are at a tight schedule and you want to get something nicely rendered and concepted so that you can show a client or someone that you want to show it to, or just have it as a portfolio piece in general. And then you can always go back to the final model, bake it out, not bake it out, sorry, retopo it, bake the normal maps and take it into Substance Paint or Mari and finish off the textures in there, and it would be great to have something like this to refer back to if you want to go back to this model and you have time, so that you can see how you wanted your textures to come out in the end. So you kind of concepting for yourself for a later stage. So here we are. There's the gold trim. You can be as careful as you like with this. I'm just showing the basic layout of it. You can change the gold to any one of these ones that will make that gold pop a bit more. I'm going to go for the hard light, and I'll just bring it down a bit on the opacity and the fill. The next one will be this one, the GK Bubblegum. You can turn off the gold trim as well if you feel like it's getting in the way. We're just going to adjust the hue and saturation for this one, so you can fit the model or the concept that we're going for more. Let's go for that. I'm just trying to figure out how I want this material to work for me. That gives quite a nice reflection on the model. So I'm going to go for an overlay. Again, I'm going to use the ID map this time, and just select the yellow, which would be the body. Using the magic wand, and come back down to the material and press on the mask, and it will mask everything else out and only leave it where we want it, so we get that spacesuit reflection going on our model now. Just adds to the texture a bit more. And moving on to the web silver, we just play with the overlay with this one. So this is going to be our metal pieces. I'm going to go for a hard light on this one, and then I'm going to come up to the ID map, select the weapon and the dark grey, come down to the web silver and hit the mask button. There we go. Again, just move these filters down, these fill and opacity down a bit, and turn on the shiny material. So we're just building up the different types of textures that we would find on our character. Just trying to find a nice part to it. So I'm going to use on an overlay, select the dark brown on the ID map, turn it off, and there we go. Let's turn that to a multiply instead. Then we're going to move on to the frame 01. This is going to give us our cavity maps, our cavity a bit more. I'll bring out the cavity a bit more. So we just want to go over to the levels and change the levels so that they're a lot harsher. Press Ctrl I to invert if you want. I'm going to use this on the soft layer. Just bring the opacity down. I'm going to move it underneath the GK bubblegum as well, and the GK bowing. I want this to be on the shoulder pads as a material. So what I'll do is I'll make a mask, invert it, and then I shall paint in that mask where I want it. Now don't worry if you go over the pipe, because we already have an ID map for the pipe. I'm not worried at all about that. Just paint in that shoulder blade. Come over to the other one. Quickly paint in that shoulder blade. Don't worry that it doesn't look in place, because we haven't actually gotten to the shadow maps yet. So once we put the shadow maps on, it'll look like it belongs better. So I'm just going to paint these parts out. There we go. Our shoulder pads have now got a colour on it. You can just turn it down a bit. I'm going to leave the DJ soft solo for now and return to that at a later stage. The sketch is another cavity type map that we can play with. So we can even use it for edging if we wanted. Or maybe not. Maybe this will be the one that we don't use on our model. That means if we turn it inverted. Inverted works nicely on the metal pieces. It's all about playing around and finding a good feel for the materials that you're using. So I'm going to use it on this weapon that he's holding now. So I just made the mask, inverted it, and now I'm just going to fill that whole weapon with that material. Again, just bring down the softness, the opacity and the fill a bit more. We move on to the reflections. Now normally I just put reflections on the hard light, bring the opacity down on both and the fill, and then I will come over here maybe and desaturate it so it's got no color information, but we have well, let's do that anyway, or maybe not, let's leave it as colored information. We have another reflection map here as well, and we could be a bit more picky about where this one will be on our model as a color dodge, or pin light. Let's go for the color dodge, and we can select using the ID map. Just gonna select that red and the pink for this. Just fill those in. Again, different color metal to the rest of the metal. Just trying to break up that top piece there. We can turn on the gold again, and you can see we've got a bit more color there, so that's good. Come over to the lights now, and we'll just turn these on individually. We'll turn the first one, the rim light, onto as a screen, and bring the opacity down on it. And you can see we've got rim light where we shouldn't have rim light, so we're just going to use a mask. So just press the mask button, Control I to invert it to all black, or actually keep it on white, and then brush out those rim light areas where we don't want rim light to be, especially on the feet, because he's going to be grounded soon. So we just want rim light in specific spots. We can use a soft brush for this one, so we can get a softer fall off on the model. Looking at it now, I might just add that light, or this piece here, the lens, with the reflection map, so it pops out a bit more. Don't worry if there's too much silver on his body. We're going to change the color of his body later, and I can show you a way of changing the color on his body so that we can get more than one version of this character in different color styles. later. So just paint out that rim light where we don't want it. Here we are. Paint it out on his feet a bit more. And don't worry that he has ugly looking feet, because we're going to cover those up soon. Turn on the next light. Actually, you can turn them all on and give them all a screen mode, and then turn them off, and we can see which ones we want on. I like this one. Let's just turn it down a bit. It's not as intense. And we want a secondary one. That will be that light that's coming from this direction. Maybe we'll turn it on to a lighten mode instead. Oh wait, wrong one. That was the screen. This one. Turn that on to as a lighten instead. There we go. Add a mask. Paint out areas you don't want that light to be hitting the character. And then we can move on to the depth map. And we'll add an adjustment to it, so we'll just adjust the levels a bit more, so we get darker in the background and lighter in the foreground. We'll change this to a soft light, no, soft light will do for now. We might change it later, so don't worry. The ambient occlusion, we just want to come up here and change the level and grab more of that ambient occlusion, darker areas in the model. And turn it down on a multiply, and turn it down. And in the shadow, just turn that to a multiply and turn down this shadow amount. Now it's going to look quite burnt, the image, but that's okay because we were working with a dark background. So what we're going to do now is we're going to delete all the information we don't need. Before we do it, actually, sorry, we will use this normal map and come into the channel section and select the green channel, and then press Ctrl A, Ctrl C, come down to the lights and press Ctrl V. It's going to jump because we haven't, there we go, just need to push it back into place. And then we'll set this to a soft light. There we go. That's just going to give us a little bit more light information on the model, and yeah, focus the light in certain areas. Once we're happy with how we got what we've got here, we'll just turn the mask layer on, fill in those areas around the border. I'm going to do a duplicate of this model, of this layer, sorry. Turn that one off. Then come into the channel, select the mask, select the inverse of that mask, and then just start deleting all the background information on our maps. Even ones that are hidden, you might want to use them later, so you can delete those for now. Oh. There we go. So now we're left with just the model on its own with the background, and we're now going to change the color of the background so it's not as dark as it is there, and we're going to add a fill, gradient, a white light in the background. off-white light in the background. There we go. We can add another layer and make it as a spot or vignette, and then add another light on his back, like so. And we can even add some color into this now. If we bring this layer to the bottom and then change the gradient parameter, I'm going to go for a pink. Maybe a dark pink. And then turn it down quite a bit. Now I want to use this mask now and duplicate it. And then Control I. And bring it down below the base model. And turn it to a multiply. And we're just going to give a fake floor shadow to our model. So we want to grab the top of it, press Shift, and bring it down, and then push it up. And this will just ground our model in the scene a bit more. And just bring it up like so, and we want to blur that as well a bit like so, and turn down the opacity and fill. Just place it where you want it. That will do for me for now. And as you can see, we now have a background for our character. I'm just going to add some more gradients. So I want a darker gradient in the background, as if it's fading into the background. And then I want to add another color, maybe a blue, coming from the opposite side. And this could also affect our light, so we can change that in a minute. Maybe the background is too dark, too light. Maybe I'll just turn that into a darker background. Just a little lighter. There we go. And now we can come back to our model and play with the shadows and the ambient occlusion, the depth more, now that we have a background for it to be in. Yeah, I think that will do. What I want to do now is just select the model, come down to the, actually add a layer over the shadow, grab the gradient tool and add a gradient from the feet upwards, so it's darker at the feet. There we go. We want the focal point to be the top half and possibly the metal weapon as well, but mostly the top half of his body needs to be the focal point of our concept. So with that done, we can now come back down and start adding color to the model. So I want to add, if I come in here and I pick on the ID map the body, I want to add a neon or a color, and I'm going to use a neon color, a pink neon color. Now I want to change this to a hard light. Hit the mask tool, mask out everything, come back with a brush and brush in where I want this color to be. So I want this color to be on his chest. So I'm just going to paint that color all over his chest area. You can choose any color you like, and I'm going to show you how we can use these layers next, later on, sorry, to change our character's color concept. I missed a piece there, so let me just grab it again. There we go. And you can see there's some light action going on underneath his helmet, so we just want to paint out any light that's in there as well. And I think this light is also affecting there, so we're just gonna make a mask and paint out that underneath there as well. And then I want to add some more color, so let's get some trim made. So I just want to find a nice milky color for this and fill the whole thing in, add it as a screen and put it over the reflection maps. Oh, as a lighten, sorry, not a screen. Add a mask, Control I, come back in using a hard edge brush. Just gonna paint in the trim of our model. Like so. We can tidy it up later. Just gonna fill in these areas here quick. Be as neat as you can. I'm just doing it as a bit of a rush job. Like so. There we are. I don't like the color we have the rest of the body, so I'm going to choose another one for it. If we come and bring another map in, layer in, sorry, and we add in a different color, or we could use the map we just created. Just see what happens when we fill in the body. Nope, not that one. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to move this layer underneath the reflection. See what happens if we move this into the reflection. We want this on top of the first reflection. This one, you're gonna add a different color. So let's go for a linear. Linear bone. Add a mask. Invert the mask and paint in this texture where we want it. See how that looks. Distracts a bit, doesn't it? You bring the opacity down on it a bit. Come over to this pink again. Maybe we could add more pink to the arms. Yeah. Add it to the forearm. Like so. And the shoulders, we come back down to where the shoulders were. Well, I'm going to change the color to the shoulders. So they're not so dark. Maybe... Ooh. That's nice. Quite like that. Even though it's a bit pixelated, it's got a nice feel to it. What happens if we add that to somewhere else? Maybe the back. No, just leave on there. We could add more pink to the gloves. Like so. For now. And let's add more gold in there now. Come up to the ID, select these parts. These cufflinks. Let's play with this DJ Soft Solar. It might not be the right color for us, so let's go to the adjustment and make it more blue hue. Turn it down a bit. And let's see what we can come up with. soft light. Just bring it down a bit. We can add a mask, invert the mask, and paint in that blue again. Let's add it to the top piece as well. Like that. And those shoulder pads, you can get a soft light. Maybe this pink is a bit too garish now, so we can change that. Change that color. Just playing around with the texture or the colors of the texture to find a nice feel for it. Maybe the shoulder pads should be more dull. And the blue can be a different color. Trying to find harmony in the colors we're choosing. There we go. We can paint the legs in a bit more. And the feet. Of course the feet, we want to take down that reflection on the feet because they are at the very bottom and we don't want to emphasize them nearly as much as the rest of the model. So we can paint them out a bit more and get that reflection, that rim light. Paint it out. Take all light away from the feet. Like so. And there's still something about this pink that's not working on here, so I'm gonna change the hue again. And this can take a long time to get exactly what you like. Change. And see what we can get out of this. Let's go for that one. Because I really want to keep that pink on there. I think that pink's really cool. It's very different to normal. Bring it down a bit. There we go. And we can even add some pink into the metal on his helmet. So there's a, let's get this part. What's going on here? There we go. Let's add that as a pink. Hide that underneath there. Use that as a multiply. In fact, I'm going to paint the whole thing and then mask off, because I want some extra areas of pink in this model. Go. What's next? Let's change this again. Really not happy with the way this one's coming out. There we go. That'll do. That will do. Let's go to the top now and add an adjustment group, and we're going to do some painting in this adjustment. So the eye, I want to add the eye as a red, so red lens. I'm just going to add red in there, and then set this to overlay. I'll just soften that with a Gaussian blur a bit. There we go. And then I'll add another layer and add this as a color dodge, and come over to the soft brush, make it bigger, and pop in some color. Make it small actually, because we want the intensity of the light to be coming from the middle. And we add another layer, and then just paint in. There we go. What is next? There's some pink in there that I didn't want actually, so we'll just paint that out. Yep. That dome on his head has got too much light bouncing on it. We want to put a little less light on there. Wondering if it's one of the reflection maps maybe. Let's take this one, this light map that we have here. It's the reflection map, sorry. See. Go. turn that to multiply, and we will adjust these pipes now. So I think there's a bit too much light on them, so what I'll do is I will just paint in some dark parts to it now. Okay, so it doesn't stand out too much. There we go. Just grab the hard brush, come down here, and add a tip of pink to the antennas. Oh. First grab these ID map. Come back down. Grab the brush tool and just paint in, as well as paint out if need be. There we go. I just want to come down here and turn down the base layer, because I think we're burning the image a bit too much now. Come back up to this gold mask, and let's add a bit of gold onto the weapon. Like so. Almost done. Again, we don't want to emphasize too much about the weapon, it's mostly the model. The rest of the model we want to emphasize more on. So let's just tone this down a bit. I'm still thinking about this color here. Go. Maybe we can erase using a soft brush, so we get a gradual color going up the model. Maybe just add a bit of purple around here, almost metal as well, like so. And we can now add some extra textures from real images to enhance the model a bit further. So what you want to do is you want to go onto Google and type in Google textured metal rust, and then just paste it into Photoshop over everything at the top in the adjustment layer. You can just multiply this by, or duplicate this, like so, cover the whole model, merge all the layers together, and then just see what it would look like if we use the layers section. I'm going to go for a soft light. Add a mask, invert it. You can even select the model in model mask, invert it, delete all the material we don't need on that image we just collected, go into the mask, find the soft brush and start painting rust in areas you want rust to be. So just going to paint a bit of rust everywhere on the metal parts so it looks a bit more aged and not perfect. Definitely on the metal, on the weapon. And on the top of the dome as well. Just breaks up that flat surface to our model. And once you've done that, then you can keep going with textures and placing them on your model and playing with them, you know, to see how what you come out with. I'm going to carry on putting some more textures on now. So I have a dirt texture. This is just going to break up this clean model body on the model. Just give it a bit of noise to it as well. Then we just want to merge them all together. Hit the multiply, or the color burn, or the darken, or the overlay, either one, any one of these you want to use. I might even just use the divide one for this one. Duplicate it. Control I to invert it. Or Control I again to invert it back and leave it as a multiply. Just move it away from the original position a bit so it's staggered, and then come back up to our mask, select the mask, invert the selection, delete the excess, bring down the opacity on one. There we go. So now that I'm happy with the way that it's looking, I can come up here and create and another adjustment layer, and this is where we're going to put all of our actual adjustment layers. So I want to start off with a brightness, crank up the brightness up a bit and the contrast. Then an exposure layer, adjustment layer. Just bring the exposure up a little bit. The color balance, and then go over to the shadows and just change the overall color and the highlight. We can move to a darker blue, like so. And then we can add a level to darken all those darker colors, and we can then add a color lookup. Let's add a color lookup and see what comes up. So you can go through these now, color lookups, and just find one that will work with our model. I quite like the look of the moonlight one. It doesn't sit well, it darkens it far too much. There's a winter cool, which is lighter, and then we can just bring down the opacity of it and also change it to a color layer. Just bring the opacity down a bit. Put in a hue and saturation, and then we can change the overall hue and saturation of the image. Maybe we want a little darkness, a little bit of vibrancy to it, to the colors that we have. You can even add a vibrancy map, or layer, or adjustment layer, sorry, and just adds more vibrance to it, like so. And just playing around with these layers now and seeing which ones work, which ones don't. I'll just bring this down a little more. And in the background, we'll add another gradient map and push the darkness from the side. We can add a layer underneath, and then pick a color, grab the eraser tool, soft brush, and just erase some of that. There we go. So I just want to add a few stickers, so I've opened up a few of these stickers that I already have created for previous projects. And I'm just going to add one here. This is going to go. Let's put this over the top in the adjustment layer. Change it to a screen. Zoom in. Scale it down. Transform it further. then what we could do is just bring the opacity down, leave the fill up, and add a mask, and then just paint out some of that letter so it's not so bright and in your face. Maybe just scale it down as well. Bring it back in the middle. Nope. And the number 2, just gonna put this on. Would have gone on his shoulder, but I think I'm gonna add it on his helmet instead. If I invert that, put it as a multiply, bring down the opacity, the fill, there we go. We're almost finished now, so what I want to do next is just add a new layer over the top of the adjustments and put a fill in, add a noise, soft light, bring it down, and maybe I'll just come in here and change one of these background colors. So instead of a blue, let's make it something else. I'll just try it and see what happens. Yeah, let's do that like that. That'll do. And we're almost finished. Just having a look and seeing where I can add some more interest to the model. I think in these antennae I can add some more interest. So I'm just gonna select them. Fill them with a really pink colour. Maybe even just bring it over the top of everything and colour dodge. Add a mask, invert it, get a hard brush out. Just paint in those details. Oh, too far. Play around, see what you come up with. Can't quite get what I want out of this. I'm going to leave it like that. There we go. So that is how I use ZBrush to render my model without color, and then bring it into Photoshop and then composite over the top. Different colors and techniques to make your model stand out a bit more without having to go through the pain of retopoing, taking into Substance Painter, UV mapping it, giving it all the textures, and then trying to render it out. This is a much quicker way to do it. Just to preview how your model could look at the end, and it's very handy if you are stuck on how you want your model to be textured, and if you don't have a character artist or a concept artist, sorry, to give you a concept on how the color should be. This is quite a nice workflow to have to practice with, and you can also do this in your spare time as a part of some artwork that you know want to do by yourself as a personal piece. Not all personal pieces have to be perfect 3D models with UV maps and textures. You can have it quite a simple character with simple renders just to show off in your portfolio. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial on rendering with ZBrush and then compositing with Photoshop. If you like what you see, then please hit the subscribe button on my channel, and I will have more videos for you soon on rendering using ZBrush and compositing in Photoshop. Thank you very much. Have a good day.